Members of the Senate and guests will please rise as we receive our distinguished president.
Senate will please come to order. Members and guests remain standing as led in devotion by our chaplain, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. St. John.
Joshua urged his people to choose this day whom you will serve. And then he declared, "As for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." From Joshua chapter 24, verse 15. Please pray with me. Oh, glorious Lord, it's almost impossible to calculate how many decisions each one of us must make during the course of a single day. Just consider how often we have to determine which option to select, what direction we need to be going in, what response to make to a constituent. And these simple examples don't really compare with the often far more serious choices that these leaders have to make here in the Senate, dear God, choices that have or often might have profound impact on the people of this state. Therefore, we pray today that you will lead each of these servants of the people to choose wisely in those decisions that genuinely matter. And may every South Carolinian, may every institution in the state benefit in meaningful ways. In your loving name we ask this, O Lord. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Senator Mulconey, what purpose do you rise?
Mr. President, I ask for a call of the Senate.
Senator Mulconey moves the call of the Senate. Clerk will ring the bell. Meeting clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Adams is present. Mr. Alexander is present. Mr. Allen is present. Mr. Bennett is present. Mr. Campson, present. Mr. Cash is present. Mr. Clymer, present. Mr. Corbin, absent. Mr. Cromer is present. Mr. Davis is present. Mr. Fanning, present. Mr. Gambrell, present. Mr. Garrett is present. Mr. Goldfinch, present. Mr. Grooms, absent. Mrs. Gustafson is present. Mr. Harpootlian, present. Mr. Hembry, absent. Mr. Hutto, absent. Mr. Jackson, absent. Mr. Kevin Johnson, absent. Mr. Michael Johnson, present. Mr. Kimbrell, present. Mr. Kempson, absent. Mr. Leatherman. Mr. Leatherman is present. Mr. Loftus, present. Mr. Malloy, absent. Mr. Martin, present. Mr. Massey, present. Mrs. Matthews, absent. Mr. McElveen, absent. Ms. McLeod, absent. Mr. Peeler, present. Mr. Rankin, absent. Mr. Rice is present. Mr. Sabb is present. Mr. Scott is present. Mrs. Sin is present. Mr. Setzler is present. Mrs. Shealy is present. Mr. Stevens is present. Mr. Talley is present. Mr. Turner is present. Mr. Verdon is present. Mr. Williams is present. Mr. Young is present.
If all senators answer the roll, Senator Hembry is present. Senator Grooms is present. Senator Malloy is present. If all senators answer the roll, polls are closed. Clerk will tabulate. 37 members are present. A quorum is present. Senator from Berkeley, Senator Adams, what purpose do you rise?
I'd like to have an introduction.
You recognize, sir.
Sir,
Let me get some attention. Senate, please come to order. Senator from Berkeley.
yes, I'd like to introduce my wife, my beautiful wife, Michelle. She is here visiting me today and seeing how government works. And, as they all say, without a wife behind you, us men would probably get lost. So I'd just like to introduce my wife, Michelle.
Welcome to the Senate. Senator from Richland, Senator Harpootlian, what purpose do you rise?
I'd like unanimous consent to take up a matter of personal interest.
You recognize, sir. Please give the Senator from Richland your attention. Senator Harpootlian.
Mr. President, this body passed a resolution. Can we get some more?
Let's suspend just a minute. Senator from Richland.
Mr. President, this body passed a resolution a couple of weeks ago commending Coach Mark Burson, coach of the South Carolina soccer team for almost 4 decades. While I'm a Clemson graduate, a proud Clemson graduate, he is my next door neighbor, and he and his wife are just wonderful people. Their family's wonderful, and look, being my neighbor ain't the easiest thing in the world. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to perhaps have the senior senator from Lexington read this. Let the clerk read it. Okay, I'm not sure. Would you read that for me, please?
Without objection. Reading clerk will read.
Senate resolution to congratulate and honor Mark Burson, head coach of the University of South Carolina men's soccer team, upon the occasion of his retirement after 43 years of outstanding service to the university, and his players wish him continued success and happiness in all his future endeavors. Whereas it is altogether fitting and proper that the members of the South Carolina Senate should pause in their deliberations to express deep gratitude to Mark Burson for his significant contributions to men's soccer at the University of South Carolina as he retires at the end of the 2021 season. Whereas Coach Burson retires as the only coach ever of USC's men's soccer and the winningest active coach in the country. Whereas the Gamecocks had only club soccer before Coach Burson arrived in March of 1978. So it was the school's newest varsity team, and he was still 2 weeks away from his 25th birthday. Whereas when he took the helm of the soccer program, the nascent team had no field, no uniforms, no balls, no schedule, no players, yet the season would open in fewer than 6 months. And whereas Coach Burson led the Gamecocks to a 13-3-1 record in the team's first season, and a year later the team posted a 14-5-0 record on the way to USC's first appearance in the NCAA tournament. In 43 seasons, he led Carolina to 22 NCAA tournaments and 35 winning seasons. Whereas as head coach of Carolina, he coached 13 All-American soccer players and 15 freshman All-Americans. Since 2005, his student athletes have garnered 79 All-Region honors and 59 All-Conference USA honors. Whereas Coach Burson coached 864 games of college soccer, accumulating 522 wins, 511 of which at the University of South Carolina. Whereas the Gamecock soccer players also excelled in the classroom with 31 academic All-Americans. His teams have twice posted the highest GPA in the nation and have earned 12 NSCAA Academic Team Awards. Since 2005, Carolina has had the highest GPA in the league 6 times. Whereas in 2015, Coach Burson received 2 major honors. He was honored with the Bill Jeffrey Award for the National Soccer Coaches Association of America, given to an individual for outstanding service or achievement in college soccer, and he was inducted in the South Carolina Letterman's Association Hall of Fame, where he joined 6 of his former players. Whereas more than 65 former players and their families came to Stone Stadium to wish farewell to their coach as he coached the last game of the final season on Saturday, April 17th, 2021. Whereas the members of the South Carolina Senate take great pleasure in extending best wishes to Mark Burson as he transitions to a richly deserved retirement and leisurely pace of the days ahead. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate, members of the South Carolina Senate, by this resolution, recognize and honor Mark Burson, head coach of the University of South Carolina men's soccer team, upon the occasion of his retirement after 43 years of outstanding service to the university and to his players, and wish him continued success and happiness in all his future endeavors.
Senator from Richland.
Thank you so much. And at this point, anyone that would like to join me in the lobby to present this to Coach Burson, please feel free to join me. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any petitions, memorials, presentments of grand jury, or such like paper? We have no communications, therefore we're on the introduction of new bills and resolutions. Clerk will read.
Introduction of a bill by Senator Massey, amends a code relating to required submission for the issuance of concealable weapon permits to remove the application fee, adds a section to the code to provide a refundable individual income tax credit for the completion of a basic or advanced handgun education course.
Bills referred to the Finance Committee.
Introduction of a Senate resolution by Senator Hembry. It proclaims June 21st to 27th, 2021 as Amateur Radio Week, and June 26th and 27th, 2021 as American Radio Relay League Amateur Radio Field Day throughout the state, to encourage all South Carolinians to recognize the many contributions of amateur radio operators, including emergency communications.
Senator from Morty, Senator Hembry, what purpose do you rise?
Mr. President, I have a unanimous consent request.
State your request, sir.
Unanimous consent to place this resolution on the calendar and take it up for immediate consideration.
Is there an objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Resolution. The question is adoption of the resolution. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. Clerk will read.
Introduction of a concurrent resolution by Senator Williams. It requests the Department of Transportation name a portion of Highway 76 in Marion County the William Penn Troy Highway and erect appropriate signs and markers.
Senator from Marion, Senator Williams.
Unanimous consent request.
State your request, sir.
To take the bill up and place it on the calendar and ask for immediate consideration.
Question is adoption of the resolution. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Without objection, resolution is adopted. Clerk will read.
Introduction of House Bill 3006 is a bill adds a section to the code to provide public schools and public school districts may not use debt collection agencies to collect or attempt to collect outstanding debts on student school lunch or breakfast accounts.
Education Committee.
Introduction of House Bill 4269. This is a bill amending the code relating to designation of voting precincts in Union County.
Local calendar.
House has returned to the Senate with amendments. S304, bill by Senators Clymer and Fanning. It amends the code so as to provide when a personal corporation using an electric vehicle charging station is not an electric utility, and further provide that any increase in customer demand or energy consumption associated with transportation electrification shall not constitute revenues for an electric utility.
Placed on the calendar. The desk is clear. Are there any requests for local bills? Any requests for local bills? Being none, we're on the call of the uncontested statewide calendar. Turn your calendars. Page 6, middle of the page. House Bill 4027. Clerk will read.
This is a bill relating to renewable water resources, REWA, formerly known as the Western Carolina Regional Sewer Authority, so as to amend REWA's service area and revise the membership of the Governing Commission.
Question is, third reading of the bill. All in favor say aye. Opposed? No. The ayes have it. The bill is given third reading. Bottom of page 7 now, House Bill 3505. Clerk will read.
Bill related to the infrastructure maintenance fee assessed against a vehicle or other item upon its first registration, so as to provide that this fee also applies to the first titling of a vehicle or other item, to provide the Department of Motor Vehicles may not issue a title until the fee has been collected.
Question is, third reading of the bill. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is given third reading. Bottom of page 8 now. House Bill 3545. Clerk will read.
It's a bill relating to the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism's authority to construct streets and roads throughout Hunting Island so as to remove references to residential areas. Amends further sections relating to payment of revenue obligations so as to remove certain actions that the department may undertake to secure payment of obligations.
Question is, third reading of the bill. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is given third reading. Page 9 now, House Bill 3884. Clerk will read.
This bill adds a section to the code to authorize the Department of Natural Resources to transmit certain documents electronically for certification of title, to allow for the collection of an electronic transmission fee, require the use of electronic lien systems for businesses and lenders engaging in the sale or financing of watercraft and outboard motors.
Question is, third reading of the bill. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is given third reading. Bottom of page 9 now, House Bill 3541. Clerk will read.
Bill to provide that the regulation of fires by the state forestry does not apply to fires used for the preparation of food or fires used in appropriate enclosures.
Question is, third reading of the bill. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is given third reading. Middle of page 10 now, House Bill 4035. Clerk will read.
Bill relating to the South Carolina Manufacturer Responsibility and Consumer Convenience Information Technology Equipment Collection and Recovery Act so as to extend the provisions of the code until December 31st, 2023, provided that the provisions of the regs shall expire on December 31st, 2023.
Question is, third reading of the bill. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Bill is given third reading. Statewide second reading bills now, bottom of page 14, Senate Bill 614, amendments on the desk. Clerk will publish the amendment. Senator from Spartanburg, Senator Martin, what purpose do you rise?
Unanimous consent request
State your request, sir.
to give this bill second reading and carry over all amendments and waive the 3/5 rule for amendments on third.
Objections heard. Clerk will read the amendment.
The amendment is by Senator Corbin, amends the bill, strikes all after enacting words in
Senator from
its
Greenville.
Mr. President, rise to explain the amendment.
You recognize, sir. Bottom of page 14, S 614. Senator Corbin's amendment. Senator from Greenville.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the body, it was just today that this bill has become uncontested. I had received words from some friends of mine on the other side of the aisle that they were going to remove their names from it after we finished the budget and let us debate it, so I appreciate that. Mr. President, the reason I filed this bill is there's been a lot of talk and rhetoric in Washington and other places about what our rights are as citizens of South Carolina and of the United States of America. And it's in the United States Constitution, Second Amendment, that we have the right to keep and bear arms. And that's been tested in court several times through various measures, looked at it different ways. But there's always been the belief that those rights would come under attack from Washington through legislation or executive order. So I filed this bill to ensure that if that were to happen, if our Second Amendment rights were ever attacked from those sources or any, that the citizens of South Carolina would always have their Second Amendment rights protected. Mr. President, the amendment before us is a strike-all amendment. And in Section 1, it says that this act shall be referred to as the Second Amendment Protection Act. That's simple enough. Section 2 deals with the finding that the General Assembly ensures in South Carolina that the unorganized militia will be a well-regulated militia pursuant to our Constitution and the U.S. Constitution. Section 3 defines the meat of the bill, which says that firearms, and it gives a list of what's included in that, which is rifles, shotguns, handguns, magazines, clips, components, and parts, and all that ammunition fitted for, shall be what is held by the unorganized militia in South Carolina. Part B of Section 3 says that pursuant to those provisions, any able-bodied citizen at least 18 years of age who can legally purchase a firearm is deemed a member of the unorganized militia unless they're already in the National Guard or the State Guard service. The other parts of the amendment follow what was on the desk pretty much. And it also has at the end, which I'm sure people will be happy to see, that a member of this unorganized militia who has a conscientious objection to the personal possession of a firearm is exempt from these provisions. So, Mr. President, if there are no questions, I move adoption.
Senator from Richland, Senator Scott, what purpose do you rise?
Here for a question.
He does.
I will yield for a question or two. Yes.
Yes, sir. Senator, tell me, what is the organized militia as you know it in the state?
The organized militia in South Carolina would probably be the National Guard or the State Guard.
I think it would be the State Guard and the Joint Service Detachment.
I didn't hear you, Senator.
It would be the State Guard and the Joint Service Detachment.
Yes.
Those are the organized militias in the state. Yes. Now, these folk who become parts of the organized militia, as stated, are there any requirements for becoming a member?
Senator, I think you join up at your will.
You just walk in, I want to join, and that's where it is?
There's an application process.
I think you may look a little bit further. You find that organized militia have to be approved by the Adjutant General and the Governor of the state to actually receive a certificate, which means they recognize you're part of the armed length of the armed forces. It's not this, you walk in, you join up, and that's it. Other requirements for that organized militia? Do you know any requirements?
Senator, you do understand that this bill and this amendment that I'm discussing has to do with the unorganized militia, not
but
the
I want to talk
organized
about
militia.
the organized militia, because in order to know what the unorganized is, you have to talk about the organized, because the Constitution talks about the
unorganized, Senator, is simply every citizen in this state over the age of 18 who is not in one of the other two. That's already in the state constitution.
I understand that, but so give me your definition of organized and tell me how we identify the unorganized militia.
According to our state constitution, the unorganized militia is comprised of all able-bodied folk I believe it says over the age of 17, but my amendment says 18 just for clarity, but that would mean 18.
For the purpose of, it has a purpose. When the settlers came in and they began to organize militias, tell me what the unorganized militia is all about.
Well, I'm glad you asked that. If you want a lesson on the unorganized militias, I'll take you all the way back to the founding of this country, Senator.
Okay, well, please.
Senator Spartanburg, what purpose do you rise?
I rise to get a little order. I can't hear the senator from Richland.
Senator, I'll take you all the way back to the founding of this country. You realize that back then, and even today, according to the Constitution, the United States government's not supposed to maintain a standing army over 2 years. Okay. There's ways around that, which they've obviously done. But when the original 13 colonies wanted to break away from the crown of England, they relied on the state's militia to do their fighting.
And once that was over, and we became a state and part of the United States, they allowed states to still have militias. And they also identified the responsibilities of what those militias are. And as of to date, in terms of militia, because really there's no unorganized militia, either part of the militia, which is part of either being the State Guard or the Joint Service Detachment, you'll find that most of those militias that's part of our system are either former Army, United States Marine, Navy, military officers of have served some type of way in some type of position in our armed services. I don't know where there would be a need for an unorganized militia unless these groups are doing something that's much different from what the intent was to have a militia.
No, I don't think you understand what the concept of unorganized militia is. Pretty much every state in the Union has one. It's in pretty much every state's constitution of America that discusses the unorganized militia. And it's probably there because of the fact that in our Constitution, the limits on the federal government as to the militia and how they're used in that service.
Senator, did you know what you used to refer to as unorganized militia is really the state militia? That's your state guard and your joint service detachment. These other folk who are unorganized militia we keep talking about for them to bear arms and do all these other things don't operate within what the militia for the state is all about. And if so, if we granted that, what would be the responsibilities of the unorganized militia?
According to the state constitution and this amendment, they are tasked with falling under the governor and the adjutant general, and they would obviously be used should the United States government ever call on the state of South Carolina or any other state for assistance in insurrection of riots or repelling an invading army or anything like that?
They already do that. And those who are part of the militia do go through the military training, thanks to Sheriff Leon Lott, who became the general for the State Guard, and prior to that began to train them and make sure if any of those were going to have weapons, they in fact would be certified to have weapons. The other group of unorganized group, I don't know how they're going to fall into that system when in fact you already have an organized militia. And so I don't know how you take an unorganized militia to do anything that falls into the militia. Did you also know that militia also had to follow federal regulations?
Well, this amendment is drafted to coincide with both the South Carolina Constitution and the U.S. Constitution, if you'll read it, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
Yes, sir. Move adoption.
Senator from Richland, Senator Harpootlian, what purpose do you rise?
Yield to a question or two?
I will yield for a question or two from my friend here for a minute.
So as I read this, and correct me if I'm wrong, this really doesn't have much to do with militia because it's every able-bodied, non-felony convicted citizen, male or female, over the age of 18 or older. Is that right?
That is correct.
And what it says, I guess the intent here is if they owned a gun, a certain kind of gun, prior to January 1 of this year, no matter what the federal government says, they get to keep that gun. Is that right?
Define what you mean when you say no matter what the federal government says.
Let's say I'm just referring to let's say the federal government said, let's just pick one. 22 rifles are prohibited under federal law. A 22 short rifle. A little tiny like what you got on your 12th birthday.
You had to pick the caliber that wouldn't even kill a mouse, didn't you, Senator?
Well, the question is, if the federal government passed a statute, a federal statute prohibiting the possession of those, this would say, ignore the federal government, you can keep your 22.
That's exactly what it would say.
Okay. Now, so do you anticipate the federal government passing such legislation?
Well, Senator, President Biden was elected, and you either believe what he says or you don't believe what he says when he stands up and speaks, correct?
I believe everything he says. Every word that pops out of his mouth, I believe.
It's like a guru for you.
He is my guru. Yes, he is.
Right. Well, I have heard him say time and time again that we must do something about the guns in this country.
Did you ever hear him say we're going to confiscate guns in this country? Now, yes or no? Go ahead.
I heard him, Senator, refer to Beto O'Rourke as a person that he would consider as putting in charge of taking a look at the gun issue.
Have you ever said that Lynn Wood is somebody that you would listen to and take into consideration what he said?
And you and I both know what Beto O'Rourke said.
We know what Lynn Wood said. Simply because Beto O'Rourke or your new chairman says something that's wacky doesn't mean that I adopt it or you adopt it. Certainly you don't subscribe to everything Lynn Wood says, correct? Do you? Well, maybe this answers the question.
Well, Senator, you have to look at everything people say, the context in which they say it, the audience they're saying it to. I would like to believe that take everybody at their word, whatever they say, but obviously in this day and age we can't do that.
Well, and Joe Biden has never said that we should confiscate weapons, has he? Has he ever said that? And I think your answer would be no.
It would be no, Senator, but he is the president. He's able to change his mind. There could be a president coming behind him of any party that may have a different persuasion on firearms.
So, but this is again a solution looking for a problem. That seems to be our agenda this year. There's no indication that by the way, the Congress would pass such a law, and clearly executive orders would not be enforceable to seize weapons. So this is made up. And my question is, why? And the answer is because it really satisfies that crazy base of yours. The folks who think that there's microchips in the vaccines.
Senator, be a
little
folks, careful when you're talking about my base now and how you describe my base, okay?
How about?
You wouldn't want to offend me, would you?
I'm not offending you. I'm offending the people that vote for you.
Well, you wouldn't want to offend the good folks back home either.
Oh, yes, I would. Yes, I would. I mean, they still wearing that tinfoil?
They may want to come down and pay you a visit one day.
Well,
Senator.
tell them, come on. I got my CWP. Come on. Okay?
Now, Senator, I just meant for a friendly conversation. You're
No,
talking
you didn't.
about bringing
No, you
weapons
didn't.
into
No,
it.
no.
I didn't realize you had such a violent temper, Senator.
I don't have a violent temper. I just, I went to Clemson. I've been up there where they made deliverance. No offense to my senator friend from Oconee. He's not here. Or Pickens. Well, Oconee, I apologize. That was a great movie. That banjo scene, I think of it every time I watch a Clemson football game. So what I'm saying is that
you hear banjo music, Senator?
I'm sorry? I can't hear you. Could I have some order, please?
Are you
Mr.
referring to that T-shirt?
Well, you'd sit down and they'd give us order.
So I'm sorry. What?
Are you referring to the T-shirt that says "Pedal Faster"? I hear banjo music.
I haven't seen that one. No. So I guess my question is, we both agree that the president hadn't threatened to take your guns. We also would agree that the assault weapons ban passed about 10 or 15 years ago that has expired did not authorize the confiscation of any gun. It prohibited the manufacture and sale of those guns, right?
That is correct.
So this guaranteeing every non-felon South Carolinian.
Are you talking about the ban that just banned clips over 10-round capacity that Bill Clinton did? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, because that wasn't an assault weapons ban. That was a ban on clips that held
and the clips
over 10,
could hold how much?
Anything over 10 rounds, I believe. Which was actually, you're talking about a useless bill, Senator. I mean, in a bill pandering to your base. You can have a clip that holds 10 rounds. You have a clip that holds 30 rounds. It doesn't matter. You can eject a clip and reinsert a clip in about 3 seconds.
Excuse me one second. Representative Bernstein, could you hold it down for just a second? We're trying to debate in here. Thank you. Go ahead.
I finished my remarks, Senator. Go ahead. I love the exchange between you and I.
I'm having the time of my life. So I guess what I'm saying is this. We both agree that President Biden's he hadn't said he's going to seize any weapons.
No, we don't both agree to that. But
you're telling me that he said, I'm going to seize weapons, or I want to take weapons away.
I am extremely suspect of the Democrats and those of the left persuasion in politics what they may do in regard to the Second Amendment. And the people that I serve want some comfort and a surety from this body that we're doing all we can to guard their Second Amendment, and that's exactly what this bill would do, Senator.
Well, two things I'd say to them. Elections have consequences. Their guy lost, okay? He lost the election, and that may be a shocker to your base again. They're unwilling to admit that he won. The courts agreed. Vice President Pence certified that the President of the United States is Joe Biden. He voted, even though some people wanted to hang him, he certified that Joe Biden was elected President of the United States. I know your people are suspect. You know why they're suspect? Because elected officials, you and others, continue to give credence to this fraudulent idea that he's going to seize your guns, or he didn't win the election, or the vaccines are ineffective or going to hurt you. You shouldn't wear a mask. And that's the problem with us, is we don't, not we, some of you don't have the courage to speak the truth. And let me say this to you. You know what? I'm going to speak to the bill. I'll say it to everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
Senator, can I say one thing before you come up?
You can say whatever you want.
I have the well,
First
correct?
Amendment. First Amendment.
I have the well, so I can say what I want. Senator, if this bill, as you say, is just a preemptive measure, or if this bill, in your opinion, doesn't do anything, then why are you fighting? Why are you making such a big deal out of it? I tried to move for adoption of the amendment twice, and you stood up to ask questions or whatever. So once again, I will move for adoption.
Senator from Georgetown, Senator Goldfinch, what purpose do you rise?
Yes,
Here we go.
quick question.
Senator, did you know I'm going to try to save your Second Amendment bona fides here?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I'm going to try to save your Second Amendment bona fides here. Did you know that a clip is what you load a magazine with? Just an FYI.
Yeah, that's why they're all in here. Thank you. Thank you. Move it on.
Senator from Richland, what purpose do you rise?
I'd like to speak to the amendment.
You recognize, sir.
So what we have here is a state statute which would prohibit the enforcement of federal law. Now, this isn't and anticipates a federal law. So everyone I've talked to said this is not a big deal because it doesn't have any effect. But you see, it does have an effect. The effect is it sends a message to the constituents you have out there that A, the federal government could take your guns or is planning to take your guns, just as we heard the senator a moment ago say, Senator from Greenville say. There is no truth to that. Beto O'Rourke, even Beto O'Rourke would concede that was hyperbole at the time. And by the way, credible, even Ted Cruz beat him. Ted Cruz, whose father helped assassinate JFK, Ted Cruz, who the President of the United States said his wife was ugly as a dog. That Ted Cruz? No. Beto lost even to him. So don't be quoting Beto O'Rourke to me. What I would say to you is that this bill is an attempt to imbue your constituents with the fear that the federal government is going to do something to take away their guns. Nothing is further from the truth. Number two, I believe that the idea of arming or allowing every citizen to believe that they can buy whatever they want and hold on to it, even if the federal government were to indicate at some point that the gun was dangerous, sends the message that guy sent, that guy right there. It's called nullification. Federalism did not exist to him. It did when he began, when he went as vice president, but then he decided the states were more powerful than the federal government, and they had the right to nullify any law they wanted. Nullification. And then we had a little dust up over those two issues. And there are pictures that you can look from the State House steps down Main Street. It looks like Hiroshima or Nagasaki after that little dust up was resolved. And the resolution of that was that federalism means certain rights are reserved to the states and certain rights are reserved to the federal government. Now, no one here is challenging the fact the federal government has passed a law saying that machine guns cannot be possessed by individuals unless they are licensed through the ATF. So certainly we understand they have the right to ban certain guns. You can't possess a silencer under federal law. I represented a guy that manufactured those and got convicted of it. Nobody was saying he had a Second Amendment right to manufacture and possess silencers or a machine gun. So the question is, does the federal government have the authority to regulate what guns can be owned, what guns can be sold, what guns can be manufactured? And clearly the answer to that, every Supreme Court case, is yes. Matter of fact, the Supreme Court is taking up the New York gun law this year, this fall. And they may even render a decision. I'm not sure whether they're going to hear argument before June or in the fall. I think it's in the fall. So by this time next year, we'll know what the United States Supreme Court says is legal and illegal. And they may say, they could say the federal government they may agree with the Senator from Greenville, the federal government's got no authority to say what gun you can own and not own. It's up to the individual states. I don't think so. They could say that. But federalism, and even the senator from Edgefield says he believes in federalism. I said even, because all of us that took an oath to support the Constitution of the United States believes that the federalism is a principle and concept that gives us the viability to exist. Now, when one passes something like this, again, you send the message to our constituents that somehow you can thumb your nose at the federal government. Now, I would point out on January 6th, we had a number of, shall I call them traitors who stormed the Capitol to stop the democratic process. The last time the Capitol was stormed was 1812 when the British tried to burn it down. Our enemies are the folks that storm Capitol buildings and try to stop the democratic process. To those of you who continue to peddle the false story that Donald Trump won the election, you need to go home and understand the kind of foment you're creating, that we then have people, they must have been feeble of mind to do what they did on January 6th. Many of them are proud of it, still proud of it. Hang Mike Pence, kill Nancy Pelosi, break out the windows, kill a cop. That's what we're in favor of, and that's what I'm sorry, Senator from Greenville, this is what this begets, this idea that we don't have to obey the feds, that we are a law unto ourselves. And so I want to say to you that if we indeed are going to pass a law saying no matter what the federal government says, our law trumps, then we're rejecting basic principles of democracy and constitutional law in the United States. Now, I'd also say that in the process of considering this militia bill, the unorganized militia, which is every man, woman, and child over the age of 18, we are encouraging them, again, to disobey federal law if it passes. We're not doing that. Poor Senator Davis over here is trying to get a bill that would be inconsistent with federal law passed. And Senator from Greenville, I'm sure you're not supporting the medical cannabis bill because it's inconsistent with federal law. Oh my God. The feds have not legalized marijuana, so how could you prescribe it as 34 or 30, how many other states do it, Senator? 36 states. So there is this tension of federalism, but it's only adoptable when it suits our purposes. The other thing, and I'm going to talk next bill that's going to be coming up will be the open carry bill, and I'll talk a bit more about hopophilia and the sexual attraction to guns. I've got a whole couple hours to talk about that, whether it's diagnosable. Pardon me? I'm sorry. Well, and the diagnosis is, I talked to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist told me, if you got it, you know it. Okay? When you put that gun on, you get a feeling, not really about the gun. So, and we'll talk about that when if the open carry bill comes up at some point in the future. I guess what I say to you, Senator, and I want to talk, I got something I think I want to show you. Excuse me 1
Senator from Spartanburg, Senator Martin, what purpose do you rise? You recognize. Please give the Senator from Spartanburg your attention. Senator Martin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, I've enjoyed this spirited debate today, but I think we've heard enough, and this bill is currently not contested, but it's on the uncontested calendar. So with that, Mr. President, I move to carry over the bill. Mr. President.
Senator from Spartanburg moves to carry over the bill. All in favor say aye. Opposed no. The ayes have it. The bill's carried over. Members of the Senate, I'd like the reading clerk to read Rule 52A.
Rule 52A of the Senate, personal attacks on senators not permitted. Executive sessions. A, no senator in debate shall directly or indirectly by any form of words impute to another senator or to other senators any conduct or motive unworthy of or unbecoming of a senator.
Remember that, senators. Page 16, bottom of the page, House Bill 3056. Clerk will read.
This is a bill repealing sections of the code relating to wildlife refuge boards and fish and game commissions.
Question is, second reading of the bill. Roll call is required. Clerk will ring the bell. Bottom page 16, House Bill 3056. Reading clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Adams. Not voting, Mr. Alexander. Aye. Mr. Allen. Not voting, Mr. Bennett. Not voting, Mr. Campson. Not voting, Mr. Cash. Mr. Cash not voting, Mr. Clymer. Aye. Mr. Corbin. Not voting, Mr. Cromer. Aye. Mr. Davis. Aye. Mr. Fanning. Aye. Mr. Gambrell. Aye. Mr. Garrett. Aye. Mr. Goldfinch. Aye. Mr. Grooms. Aye. Mrs. Gustafson. Not voting, Mr. Harpootlian. Aye. Mr. Hembry. Aye. Mr. Hutto. Aye. Mr. Jackson. Aye. Mr. Kevin Johnson. Aye. Mr. Michael Johnson. Aye. Mr. Kimbrell. Aye. Mr. Kempson. Aye. Mr. Leatherman. Mr. Leatherman not voting. Mr. Loftus. Aye. Mr. Malloy. Aye. Mr. Martin. Aye. Mr. Massey. Aye. Mrs. Matthews. Aye. Mr. McElveen. Aye. Mr. McLeod. Aye. Mr. Peeler.
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Rankin. Aye. Mr. Rice. Aye. Mr. Sabb. Aye. Mr. Scott. Scott not voting. Mrs. Sin. Mr. Scott votes aye. Mrs. Sin votes aye. Mr. Setzler. Aye. Mrs. Shealy. Aye. Mr. Stevens. Aye. Mr. Talley. Aye. Mr. Turner. Aye. Mr. Verdon. Aye. Mr. Williams. Aye. Mr. Young. Aye.
All senators voted. Senator Corbin votes aye. Senator Allen votes aye. Senator Cash votes aye. Senator Adams votes aye. Senator Grooms votes aye. Senator Gustafson votes aye. Senator Bennett votes aye. Have all senators voted? Polls are closed. Clerk will tabulate. Senator from Berkeley, Senator Grooms, what purpose do you rise?
Unanimous consent to request leave of Senator from Charleston, Senator Campson, who's in a meeting right now and unable to vote.
Is there objection? Hearing none, so ordered. By a vote of 44-0, the bills are given second reading. Still on statewide second reading bills, page 18, top of the page, Senate Bill 748. Clerk will read.
This is a joint resolution approving regulations of the Department of Labor Licensing and Regulation, Auctioneers Commission, relating to the Auctioneers Commission.
Senator from Edgefield, Senator Massey, what purpose do you rise?
To explain the resolution.
You recognize, sir.
Mr. President, this is a resolution approving regulations from the Auctioneers Commission. It came out of the LCI committee. We've had this on the calendar for a few weeks now. I move to recommit to the committee.
Motion to recommit. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is recommitted. Bottom of page 18 now, House Bill 3957. Amendments on the desk. Clerk will publish the First Amendment.
The Fish, Game, and Forestry Committee proposes the following amendment. Minutes of bill.
Committee amendment, Senator from Orangeburg. Senator Hutto, what purpose do you rise?
The chairman is not here. I'd move to carry over.
Motion is Senator from Georgetown. Senator Goldfinch, what purpose do you rise?
The chairman's asked me to take it up. I'm happy to address the bill if we can get it done. Thank you, Mr. President. Just to explain the bill.
Amendment.
Fish, Game, and Forestry Committee proposes the following amendment. Minutes of bill.
Senator from Georgetown.
Explain the bill.
Recognize.
Many of you have heard we have a tremendous problem with the flounder. We did a regional stock assessment in 2017. The data was complete in 2017, which was actually just before we made a change in the law in 2017. The results did not come out until 2019, which showed a precipitous drop in the flounder population. So the fishing community, DNR, and a number of us on Fish and Game came together to try to put a plan together. This is the result of that plan. Here's the bottom line. The fishery goes from what it is now to 10 fish, from 10 fish to 5 fish, 5 fish per person, 10 fish per boat, 16-inch fish rather than a 15-inch fish. And there is $5 on every saltwater fishing license for locals, for residents, which will be used to start a flounder hatchery in South Carolina, which we do not have now. So there's also some out-of-state increases. I assume everybody's mostly concerned about in-state increases. The in-state increase is supported by angler groups, supported by CCA, supported by the chairman, supported by myself, and that's $5, which will go to start a flounder hatchery in South Carolina. If there are no questions, I move for adoption.
Question is adoption of the amendment. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment's adopted. No further amendments. Now the question is second reading of the bill as amended. Senator from Oconee, what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Unanimous consent to use the last unanimous roll call for second reading.
Is there objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Bill will receive a 44-0 vote for second reading. Page 19 now, top of the page, House Bill 3244, amendments on the desk. Clerk will publish the committee amendment.
Labor, Commerce, and Industry Committee proposes the following amendment. Minutes of bill. Page 2, strikes lines 1 through 4.
Senator Henry, what purpose do you rise?
I'm doing some research, or having staff do some research on some aspects of this bill. Would like to carry it over for today.
Senator from Maury moves to carry over the bill. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is carried over. Middle of page 19 now, House Bill 4098. We'll read.
Joint resolution approving regulations of the Clemson University State Crop Pest Commission relating to Asian longhorn.
Senator Talley, what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to explain the bill.
Recognize, sir.
Thank you. Members, this is a regulation promulgated by Clemson through its Crop Pest Association in regards to the Asian long-haired beetle and its attacks on our tree population, mainly right now in the low country. It's about a 72-mile radius. outside of the Charleston area. This would allow them to continue to receive federal funds to reimburse any landowner affected by it and continue to look for this pest.
Question is, second reading of the bill. Roll call is required. Senator from Oconee, what purpose do you rise?
President, unanimous consent to use the last recorded vote for second reading.
Is there objection? Senator from Fairfield, Senator Fanning.
Could the senator from Oconee withhold his unanimous consent request for a leave request?
He does.
Unanimous consent request?
What's your request, sir?
Leave for the senator from Richland, Senator Jackson, for the next hour.
Is there objection? Hearing none, so ordered. I would make that a 43-0 vote without objection. Now turn your calendars, top of page 20, House Bill 3612. Clerk will read. Senator from Spartanburg. Senator
I'm waiting on some feedback from some of my districts. I'd like to carry this bill over for the day.
Senator from Spartanburg moves to carry over House Bill 3612. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is carried over. Brings us to the bottom, page 20, Senate Bill 264, Senator from Spartanburg.
Oh, Mr. President, just briefly, I know if I can just be heard briefly from my desk. In the last 2 weeks of session, I always call Rule 39, but in the last 2 weeks of session, I'm never inclined to call Rule 39 because things need to get done. We get bogged down. So I don't intend to call the Rule 39 the remainder of these 2 weeks until sine die. So I just wanted to let the body know that. If somebody else wants to do that, it's certainly, you're right, it's within the rules, but in the last 2 weeks, I don't call the rule.
Senator from Pickens. Senator Rice, what purpose do you rise? No.
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry, sir.
3308 was not contested. It is now. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Who contested that bill?
Senator from York, Senator Clymer. Brings us to bottom page 20, Senate Bill 264. Amendments on the desk. Clerk will publish the committee amendment.
Medical Affairs Committee proposes the following amendment. Amends the bill. Strike Section 1 and insert Section 1, subsection A. Chapter 31, Title 43 of the Code, amended by adding Article 3, Disabled Self-Employment Development Trust Fund.
Senator from Spartanburg, Senator Martin, what purpose do you rise?
I wish to explain the bill and amendments.
You recognize, sir. Please give the Senator from Spartanburg your attention.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, this Bill 264 is by the Senator from Colleton, Senator Bright Matthews. We heard testimony in Medical Affairs. It's about the Disabled Self-Employment Development Trust Fund. What it does is it establishes, just to be brief, we had good testimony. We had a gentleman from Spartanburg that came down and testified. The people that want to work and don't want to be dependent on the system, this gives them a way for people to contribute. It doesn't cost the taxpayers any money, but it gives them a way for businesses to contribute and let them start their own businesses so they can be self-sufficient. So we didn't have any opposition. The Department of Disabilities and Special Needs and Voc Rehab have helped us tweak some of the language, and that's what the committee amendment does. So I'd move, if there's no questions, I'd move for adoption of the committee amendment.
Question is adoption of the amendment. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment's adopted.
Is there one
additional amendment? Yes. Clerk will read.
The amendment is by Senator Martin. It amends the bill. It strikes all after the enacting words and inserts.
Senator from Spartanburg, Senator Martin.
Mr. President, this amendment here is the one, I believe, where we worked with Voc Rehab and the Department of Special Needs to change the name to South Carolinians with Disabilities Self-Employment Development Trust Fund. It makes the name resonate more with the terminology that's used across all the agencies, and that's really what this does. It doesn't change anything else, but just...
Senator Morey, Senator Henry, what purpose do you rise?
Question.
Yes, sir, gladly.
I was just glancing at it and then maybe taking care of in the amendment. I kind of glancing at it from my desk. Does this bill define the universe of people that would be considered disabled? Because that is certainly a can be a very broad definition or very narrow definition, and I know other sections of the code define it. I didn't know if this, I couldn't find where it defined it, but I may be missing it.
Yeah, and I would have to, I don't want to leave the podium to come back to my desk. I thought I had notes on that, but I don't.
Let me get some attention. Senate, please come to order. Please come to order. Take your conversation outside.
The one thing in section 44, vocational rehab shall establish and administer the program that awards grants to qualifying residents of this state with physical or mental impairments who start, expand, or acquire a business within South Carolina. So I believe, I don't want to tell you, hold on, let me see. I'm sorry, Senator Famori, but it's just my understanding that Voc Rehab is promulgating all those regulations. I mean, we can certainly carry it over. I'm not trying to rush this by any means. I want to make sure we get your questions answered, but it's my understanding, not trying to look through the notes, that Voc Rehab and Department of Disabilities and Special Needs have worked together to find where this goes, and it's my understanding that that they define these physical or mental impairments. So that's my understanding.
Senator from Colleton, Senator Matthews, what purpose do you have?
Senator Famori still remaining open to, and I'd like to answer that question, if I can, since it was my bill.
You want to take the podium,
Not
or do you want to ask
necessarily.
me a question?
Just to explain the answer to Senator Hembree's question, the person has to qualify under the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs for their services, and once they're qualified statutorily, then they can take under this statute.
Senator from Colleton, I really appreciate that. I left another paper I had in my office, and I just couldn't get to the exact answer. And hopefully that satisfies the Senator Famori. Okay, with that, if there's no other questions, I'll move adoption of the amendment.
Question is adoption of the amendment. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment's adopted.
With that, Mr. President,
No further amendment.
I'd move second reading of the bill.
Question is second reading of the bill as amended. Roll call is required. Senator from Oconee.
Unanimous consent request
State your request, sir.
to use the last unanimous recorded vote for second reading of this bill.
Is there objection? Hearing none, so ordered. 43-0. Bill is given second reading. Page 21 now, Senate Bill 508. Amendments on the desk. Clerk will publish the First Amendment.
Committee amendment, Mr. President.
First Committee Amendment. Senate Bill 508.
Medical Affairs Committee proposes the following amendment. Mentioned bill strikes all after the
Senator
enacted
Spartanburg,
words and
Senator
inserts.
Martin, what purpose do you rise?
Wish to be heard on the amendment.
You recognize, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, this bill here, 508, by Senator Sheila Hutto. I was a subcommittee chairman on this bill, but I know the senator from Orangeburg has spent a lot more time on it, so he may want to come up and be heard. The one thing that this bill does, it allows us to get a do not resuscitate order for children under the age of 18. So we heard testimony from a lot of different people. We heard testimony from parents who were in the difficult situation of having a child with an illness that could terminate their life. So the biggest thing, we had doctors that were kind of, I hate to say on both sides of the issue, but maybe looking at it from different perspectives, but they all converged on some language that the pro-life community came up with to define, instead of a serious illness that could drag on for years, they wanted to define this as a terminal illness, which had more definitions in the medical community that let people know there wasn't much time left in that life. But the one thing that I didn't understand until I was on this committee, and the senator from Orangeburg has dealt with this for quite a while, is that if they bring a child home, most of the parents, and I would hate to be in this situation, I would hate for any parent to be in this situation, but when they bring that child that's in a situation, they want to get them home. They want them to be at peace at home, and if they're going to pass, they want them to pass at home around friends and family where they can be loved on. if they're in the hospital, if they were to stay in the hospital, they could easily get a do not resuscitate band for their arm, and the hospital would not try to revive them. If they bring them home currently, there's no method for that. So if they're at home and there's a caregiver there and something happens and they call 911, EMS comes out. They have to do everything in their power to save that life, even though it's not the parent's wishes. So one of the other things in this amendment is there's a process if both parents don't agree. And I know the Senator from Orangeburg can probably elaborate on that more if there's any questions. But if you have a husband and wife that don't agree, there is a process through the courts to deal with that. So it basically allows folks to get this same thing they could have in the hospital to carry their child home. So, Senator from Orangeburg, would you like to come up and say a few words, or do you want to ask a question?
Senator from Orangeburg.
And unless anybody has any questions, I'd move adoption of the amendment.
Senator from Williamsburg, Senator Sabb, what purpose do you rise?
Senator from Spartanburg would yield, or the Senator from Orangeburg. And I was listening attentively, and I'll be candid, I sort of felt the Senator from Spartanburg's emotion, if you will, as it relates to these kinds of subjects. But I was just curious, you mentioned that there's a process associated with husband and wife. I assume that process is also with mother and father.
Well, yes, that's more what I guess I meant than saying that. So,
Question is adoption of the amendment. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment's adopted. No further amendments. Now the question is second reading of the bill as amended. Roll call is required. Senator from Oconee, what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Unanimous consent to use the last unanimous roll call for second reading of this bill.
Objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Oh, Senator from Charleston, Senator Campson.
With adding the senator from Charleston.
Is there objection? Hearing none, so ordered. That would be a vote of. You want to add the senator from Florence, make it 45?
Further, if I could add the senator from Florence.
Without objection, 45-0, the bill gives a second reading. Bottom of page 21 now, House Bill 3222. Senator from Anderson, Senator Gamble, what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to explain the bill.
You recognize, sir.
This bill deals with regulation and also penalties for commercial waste tire facilities and those who haul to these facilities. It establishes penalties. It also gives DHEC the authority to inspect, and it also creates a waste tire rebate facility list that they must now get a permit. We've had a bad time with waste tires in the lower part of the state and also in the upper part of the state. It also, and the biggest thing to keep in mind, it does not prohibit any individual from moving some tires to their landfill.
Question is, Senator from Darlington, Senator Malloy, what purpose do you rise?
See if the senator will yield.
Certainly.
He will for a question.
Senator, what are the penalties? And
Penalties,
for what violation?
Okay, the penalties for DHEC comes in and gets their records and determines that they're over 80% of their capacity. The first penalty, they receive a written warning and it gives them 7 days to correct that. The second written warning is 21 days to reduce back down to 80% of permitted capacity. And then after 21 days, suspension by written notice and removal from the waste tire rebate facility list. And that suspension would remain until waste tires are reduced to their 80% of their permitted capacity.
And are those penalties criminal penalties?
I would think they would be, yes, sir. And I think there's some fines involved also.
And so but the first offense is not a criminal penalty?
No, sir. It just gives them 7 days to get back into compliance.
And then but the second one could possibly be criminal?
Would be a second written warning, and I don't think it so much would be a criminal. The biggest thing they just face is being removed from the rebate facility tire list.
Are they subject to civil liability if they have a civil penalty?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
I'd like to take a second and review this. It's a House bill, maybe until tomorrow. Okay.
Sure.
Move to carry on.
Senator from Darlington moves to carry over the bill. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The The ayes have it. Bill's carried over. This is page 22, Senate Bill 768, concurrent resolution. Senator.
This is a concurrent resolution to nominate Mr. William Inman to serve on the Savannah River Site Research Authority Board of Directors.
Senator Macon, what purpose do you rise?
I introduced this bill along with the co-sponsors last Tuesday and put my name on it. I explained it then, and I'll explain it again. I wanted to give all the members of the body a chance to look at this if they had any questions. What this is the board was created in 1998 by Governor David Beasley. It's the Savannah River Site Redevelopment Authority Board. The board oversees the disposal of property that's been turned over to the state as a result of a closure, a realignment, or a downsizing at the Savannah River site. There's a vacant board seat that is one that's appointed by the governor upon the nomination of a person by a majority of the Senate and a majority of the House. The staff was not able to determine how this seat was filled previously after 1998, so our staff drafted this concurrent resolution which will allow us to approve this hopefully and then send it to the House, and then upon approval by the House, it'll go to the governor and have the governor fill the seat. I'll be glad to answer any questions. Mr. Inman is a longtime person who is employed by the Aiken Electric Co-op, and he is a Clemson University graduate and is very qualified for this board. I move for passage.
Question is the adoption of the resolution. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. Senator from Pickens, Senator Rice, what purpose do you rise?
It's consent to go back to page 20, bill number 3308. The objection was removed from that. Give it second reading.
It's still contested now.
Could you, parliamentary inquiry, could you tell me who's contesting that now?
Senator from Rooms and Senator from Kershaw, Senator Gustafson. Now that brings us to page 4, motion periods. Senator from Edgefield, what purpose do you rise?
Move to dispense with the balance of the motion period.
All in favor of dispensing balance of the motion period, vote aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Motion period is now closed. Moves to special orders now. House Bill 3094. Amendments on the desk. Clerk will publish the first amendment.
Number 1A by Senator Massey amends a bill, strike section 4 and 5 in their entirety and inserts.
Senator from Macon.
I'd like to be recognized on bill.
You're recognized, sir. Please give the Senator from Macon your attention. Senator Young.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the body. I'd like to take some time to walk through and explain this bill.
Need some order first. Senate, please come to order. Take your conversations outside, please. Must insist on order. Very important subject. Senator Young.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the body. I chaired the subcommittee in Judiciary that met twice last week. The members of the subcommittee were the Senator from McCormick, Senator Garrett, Senator from Edgefield, Senator Massey, Senator from Darlington, Senator Malloy, and the Senator from Charleston, Senator Kempson. We met twice. We had testimony that lasted for more than 3 hours. We heard from a number of people around the state. This bill passed the House by a vote of 82 to 33 on March 17th. It is the Open Carry with Training Act. It does not expand who can carry, nor does it expand where someone can carry a handgun. It adds another way that a person who is a licensed permit holder in the state can carry a handgun. The bill would allow a concealed weapon permit holder to carry concealable weapons openly on them or in their motor vehicles. Property owners could post conforming signage to or allow to prohibit either concealed or open carry of handguns or both on their property. Also, the training for a concealed weapon permit license, there's some additional subject matter that's been added where there would be instruction on properly securing a firearm in a holster instruction on what is a cocked and locked firearm and the carrying of it, instruction on the methods for responding to anyone who attempts to take a concealed weapon permit holder's firearm from that permit holder's holster, and also instruction on hostile situations and de-escalation techniques as to those situations. The bill further has a section toward the end that allows a governing body of a local government to restrict the open carrying of a firearm on public property when the governing body issues a permit for either a public protest, a rally, a fair, a parade, a festival, or other organized event. And finally, I mentioned this briefly a moment ago, the bill clarifies the signage that a business can post to prohibit concealable weapons or open carrying of handguns. Now, again, I want to emphasize that this bill, as it is drafted and before us, and as passed by the House, does not expand who can carry, nor does it expand where they can carry. It adds another way that a weapons permit holder can carry a handgun in this state. Now, one of the questions that came up in the subcommittee was, what is the law in Georgia and North Carolina, two border states? So Georgia and North Carolina each allow the open carrying of a handgun. Georgia, they require that a person who openly carries a handgun to have a weapons carry license. On the other hand, North Carolina allows the open carrying of a handgun with no permit and no license. Now, the testimony that we heard in the report from the staff was that South Carolina is one of, I think, 5 states that do not or does not allow, South Carolina is one of 5 states, and those 5 states do not allow the open carrying of a handgun by anyone unless it's law enforcement or someone else who's approved to do so. There are 45 states that allow some form of open carrying of a handgun in the United States. And again, I mentioned Georgia and North Carolina. There are 20 states that allow unrestricted carrying of a handgun, either openly or concealable, without a permit. And then there's a number of states that allow open carry where no permit's required, but they do require a permit for concealed carry. Now, South Carolina does allow the open carrying of a long gun, but we don't allow the open carrying of a handgun. Now, we had testimony from the National Rifle Association, and they testified that they cited a 2017 study from the American Journal of Public Health that stated that less than 1 in 4 of concealable weapon permit holders had carried in a 30-day period, and less than 10% of those 1 in 4 would carry openly if they were allowed to. So less than 1 in 4 had carried, and of those 1 in 4, less than 10% of those would carry openly if they were allowed to in their state. In some of those states, they are allowed to, but again, in South Carolina, it's not currently allowed, and that's why this bill is before us. Representative Bobby Cox testified. He's the primary sponsor of the House bill. If you look at the bill, there's a large number of co-sponsors in the House. There's Republicans and Democrats on the House bill that co-sponsored it. There are we heard testimony from I think about over approximately 30 people in a 2-day period.
Senator from Orangeburg, Senator Stevens, what purpose do you have?
Senator, yield for a question.
I'll yield. Yes, sir.
Under reading a section here that deals with a church renting or leasing a school gymnasium for an activity. Am I interpreting right that the church can actually have someone who is, let's say, a security person having a concealed or unconcealed weapon during that time period? Is my interpretation correct?
Senator, which section are you referring to?
One second. Section 7. Yeah. Section 7, Section 7, Article 4, Section 23 through 31-232.
Yep, so this would be a new section added that's under 23-31-232. And this is actually language that is similar to a bill that I think the Senate may have passed in the House. I know it's come up before. This would allow a concealed weapon permit holder to carry on a church property or on a school property
A church.
only at certain times, and they got to have permission.
That's permission by the church.
Yeah. Now, we didn't get any testimony on this section in the subcommittee, none on the Section 7. But this is this would allow. I think this is similar to a bill that Senator Cash and others have sponsored in the Senate in the past. But this is language that was added in the House bill or was in the House bill, and it would allow the carrying of a. Basically, it says that a person who holds a valid permit may carry a concealed weapon on the leased premises of an elementary or secondary school if there's a church that's, like, for example, if there are some churches in this state that meet at a school property. And so what this is saying is that if it's a Sunday and the church is having a service and the service is at the school, the concealed weapon permit holder would be allowed to carry on that school property to that church service under these provisions that are outlined on page 5 of the bill.
Would that contradict any school rules that are established or policies that is established by the school district?
Well, this language would override anything with respect to the school district rule. It says that a school district may request that a church utilizing a school property for its services disclose and notify the district that persons are or may be carrying concealed weapons on the property. So the school district can lease the property to the church for using that property for church services. The church would be allowed to allow some people from the church to carry concealed to the church service. And the school district can require that the church notify the district if they're going to allow people to do that at the church. Because the law currently says you can't carry in a church unless you get permission. That's the existing law. It's in the current concealed weapon permit law. Again, this bill doesn't change any of these places that you can and can't carry. It's in SC Code section.
I'm just
23.
curious about whether or not any of this will supersede any policy that has been established by the school district as it relates.
Well, I can tell you, if we pass this law and it becomes the law of this state, it's going to overrule a school district policy, most likely. Okay? So if you've got a concern about that, then I'd suggest you look at it and see if you want to put an amendment up. But this particular provision, if we pass it, I think it will overrule a school district policy because this will become the law of the state.
Yes, sir. I do have some reservations about that, and
You got more
Mansfield, what purpose do you rise?
Mr. President, I want to see if the Senator from Macon would yield for a few questions along the lines that the Senator from Orangeburg has brought up.
Yes.
Well,
Senator, I think you mentioned that under current law, permit holders can carry in churches if they have permission from church leadership. Is that right?
They have to have permission from the church to carry, yes, correct.
Now, isn't it true, there are a number of churches that rent or lease space from schools around the state to hold their services on Sunday mornings.
There are, that's correct.
What this would do is it would say that if we're in a situation where a church is leasing that space outside of school hours, not in school hours, for outside of school hours, that they can then allow for the carry of weapons as they would in their own church building.
That's right. I mean, this is like I said, an example. This is like on a Sunday morning when there's church at the school. It's not like it wouldn't be on a Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday or Friday when there's school in place. They wouldn't be having a church there at the same time there's school. So it specifically says it's only during the times that the church has the use and enjoyment of the property pursuant to the lease with the school.
And Senator, doesn't it also provide that it would not apply during any time where there may be extracurricular activities? Essentially, it wouldn't apply at all when there are students around. I think that's in sub item 3.
That's correct.
Yeah, so it would only apply in a situation where the church is there meeting at the school. They've leased it. They've got an agreement with the school district. They tell them when they're going to be there. That time period is confined. And there are no students there for academic purposes or extracurricular activities. It's going to be only for those church service times when students are not on the campus. Isn't that right?
That's right.
Okay.
Senator from Greenville, Senator Loftus, what purpose do you rise?
It was to ask it's the senator for you for a question, but I believe the senator from Edgefield has answered that. It is only, as far as overriding any school policy, as the senator from Edgefield has said, students will not be there. It wouldn't apply when students are there, just when the church services are there.
Yeah, what it says, again, is that if a church is leasing the school property and the church gives permission to someone to carry a concealable weapon at the church on the property that the church has leased, then that person can carry that concealed weapon as long as it's during a time that the church has the use and enjoyment of the property, and it's not at a time that the school is engaged in any kind of curricular or extracurricular school-sponsored activity on the same property.
Senator from Clarendon, what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. See if the senator will yield for a couple of questions.
I will.
Thank you, Senator. Senator, are you in favor of this bill?
Yeah, I voted in favor of it in the subcommittee. It passed 3-2.
I'm just wondering, from your standpoint, I know we have a concealed weapons permit program and concealed weapons. I'm a CWP people and I holder, and I like the fact that we can carry our weapons concealed. What's good about open carry, in your opinion?
Well, there were people that testified in the subcommittee that wants to see this bill enacted because there were, I think, at least 2 people who testified and said that under the current law, it's their belief that if they're carrying concealed and they accidentally allow their concealed handgun to be seen or come out in the open, that they can be held in violation of the existing law. So they would prefer that we have this form of carry so that if they have an accidental display of their concealed weapon, they won't be violating the law. Now, there were also a good bit of testimony from those that were in favor of the bill to say that the vast majority of permit holders are going to want to continue to carry concealed and not carry openly because they don't want other people to know that they're carrying a concealed weapon. They would rather it be something that's not readily visible to someone else.
That makes sense to me. I'm not surprised that that's the case, but it seems like if the vast majority of the people would like to continue to carry concealed. I'm just wondering why we want to pass a bill that would allow open carry. But I was having a conversation and you said something about the NRA. Would you repeat what the NRA testified to?
Well, they're in favor of this bill. They testified that they mentioned the North Carolina and Georgia laws, and that Georgia and North Carolina both already allow open carry of a handgun. I mentioned that earlier. They mentioned that we're one of the only 5 states that does not allow open carrying of a handgun, and they mentioned the 2017 American Journal of Public Health study where only a very small percentage of gun permit holders indicated any interest in carrying openly. I should say it was not that they indicated an interest. It was that they would carry openly if they were legally allowed to. Because I think that the testimony was, and it's consistent with what you mentioned earlier, is that most permit holders are going to continue to carry concealed, even if they could carry openly for personal preference reasons, but that mainly is that they would rather someone not know they're carrying concealed than to know that they're carrying openly. And that may be why if you go to North Carolina or go to Georgia, you really don't see many people that have a handgun on their hip.
Did you know I went to Wilmington one weekend for a conference, and did you know I was just astonished and disappointed and frustrated and felt unsafe to walk downtown, or whether they call it uptown or downtown in Wilmington, and just see so many people walking around displaying guns openly, long guns on their hips or whatever. And did you know I couldn't wait to leave Wilmington because I just didn't like that for me or my family. Did the NRA mention, I think you said they mentioned the different states, did they mention that 47 states have hate crime legislation, or that 39 states have expanded Medicaid?
No, the topic of our subcommittee was on open carry.
I know, I just asked that because a lot of times when people are trying to support a bill, they want to mention what other states do and it suits their causes. Now, South Carolina, from what I'm being told over and over again, is that our #1 industry is tourism. And I wonder, in the subcommittee, was there any concern about the fact of how open carry might affect our tourism industry if people from other states or other parts of the state, like I was when I was in Wilmington, don't like the fact that they're out trying to have a great time with their family and people are walking around with guns openly displayed. Was there any concern about that?
There was no testimony
as far as how it would hurt our tourism industry?
I mean, there might have been somebody that mentioned, you know, that this could have an adverse impact on tourism, but there wasn't anyone there from any official position, as I recall, to testify as to the for or against as to tourism.
So the other thing I think I read about the bill, I think I read that one of the places that open carry was not allowed was, for example, at the State House, on the State House grounds. Am I right?
I think that's current law.
Okay. I just wonder why it's such a popular bill that so many people are in favor of it, but they don't want to have them around us here at the State House. I don't support that. I just don't support the bill either, but if I did support it, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But I think those are all the questions I have now. I just want you to know that I'm just very concerned about this open carry. Did you know, with the fact that we have so much going on throughout our country and throughout our state involving guns, and I think, did you know that we're not talking about taking guns away, but I just think that open carry is going to be a decision that we may look back and regret, because I think it's going to be harmful to the state. But thank you for answering my question, Senator.
You're welcome. You mentioned about where you can carry the existing law, just for purposes of, because some of the members may not know, you cannot carry currently, if you have a concealed weapon permit, into a, #1, a law enforcement, correctional, or detention facility. #2, a courthouse or courtroom. #3, a polling place on election day. #4, office of or the business meeting of the governing body of a county, public school district, municipality, or special purpose district. #5, a school or college athletic event that is not related to firearms. Number 6, a daycare facility or a preschool facility. Number 7, a place where the carrying of firearms is prohibited by federal law. Number 8, a church or other established religious sanctuary unless express permission is given by the appropriate church official or governing body. We've talked about that a moment ago. Number 9, a hospital, medical clinic, doctor's office, or any other facility where medical service or procedures are performed unless expressly authorized by the employer. And number 10, any place where there's a sign that prohibits the person from being able to carry it in. That's like in the situation of a private business owner. If you don't want them being able to carry in, you put a sign, and that's some of the things that this bill does, is to clarify the signage that would be used if it was to pass. So again, this bill does not change who can carry. It does not change where you can carry. It adds another way for someone to carry. And
at the subcommittee level, from the state law enforcement division or any other law enforcement agency or organization during the subcommittee, how they felt about open carry in South Carolina?
The South Carolina Sheriff's Association informed me that they were neutral. Chief Reynolds, Luther Reynolds, I think it's Chief Reynolds from the Charleston Chief Police Department testified. He stated that he was opposed, gave the reasons why. Former and retired Chief of SLED, Robert Stewart, who was Chief of SLED when the current concealed weapon permit law was enacted in the 1990s, testified in his capacity as on behalf of the Fraternal Order of Police. He said that he opposed the bill as it believes that the current law has worked well. So those were, I believe, the only police-related testimony that we received.
Nothing from SLED?
Did not have any testimony from SLED, no.
Thank you.
Senator from Charleston, Senator Kempson, will the purpose do you rise?
When the senator yields the floor, I'd like to be heard on the bill.
Senator May. Senator from Greenville, Senator Allen, will the purpose do you rise?
See if the senator will yield for a quick question.
I'll yield.
Senator, the senator from Clarendon asked you about the Sheriff's Association and SLED as to whether you'd heard from them. In response to that, you said that the Sheriff's Association was neutral on this legislation. Is that correct?
That's what I was informed, yes.
Is there any way or any information that you might have that identifies what sheriffs and what counties are for this and against this legislation?
I don't have that. If I had it, I'd make it available to you. I'm sure that you could probably get that.
Could you tell me who informed you of that?
Their government relations person.
All right, and that is?
Mr. Bruder.
Bruder. All right, thank you.
Senator from Martinsburg, Senator Hutto, will the purpose do you rise?
See if you yield for a couple questions.
Yes, sir.
He will.
So did I understand that the best reason anybody gave you for wanting to support this is that they thought their gun might slip outside their coat and they might get arrested?
No, that's not the only reason.
That was the best reason. That's the one you led off with, right?
That was one reason. No, that's not the best reason. I never said that was the best reason.
All right. Well, let me, on that reason, did any of them say that had ever happened to them before?
Where they had it happen and they got charged?
They'd been charged with that.
I don't think so.
All right. Well, what was your best reason?
Well, you know, there were a lot of people that testified and said that they believe that this is something that we should do to further rights that citizens have under the Second Amendment, that there are 45 other states that do this. Georgia and North Carolina allow it. Again, North Carolina does not require a permit. This would require the permit, and Georgia does require the permit. And that's a good summary of what the testimony was.
So when we get to the full committee this afternoon and we find out that we're only one or two other states that doesn't have hate crimes, that's a good enough reason for you, is that we're the last ones we need to do it?
We'll have a debate about that, and I'm not here to talk about the hate crime bill, but you and I can talk about it. And
I understand, but you're giving me your best reason, and your best reason is because all the other ones do it.
Not necessarily is it the best reason. The best reason is because it is the Second Amendment, and there are a number of people that around the state who believe that we should allow folks who are passed a background check, who have been able to obtain a permit. If they can do that, they ought to be allowed to carry openly in limited circumstances if that's how they choose to carry. Again, this does not expand who can carry or where they can carry. It simply would change how someone can carry.
So I'm with you, and I support the Second Amendment. I support people having guns. I have guns, okay? But it seems to me that the distinction we're making here is, under current law, if you've got the training and you want to have a gun, you can have a gun. But to make it from concealed to open it's not what you want for yourself, it's what you want to impart to other people. Hey, I got a gun. So if you know you've got a gun and it's concealed, you know you've got a gun. The difference here is that you don't want to know you have a gun. You want me to know you have a gun. Isn't that what it's all about?
Well, that's certainly an argument that can be made. And obviously, if you're carrying it openly, there's going to be people that see it. Now, there's going to be some people that are simply just not going to want to carry openly because they would prefer to have the element of surprise and be able to, not let others know that they've got one.
Well, but it gets back to what Senator from Clarendon was saying when he went to Wilmington. If he was walking around and 80 people had a gun and he didn't know it, it wasn't bothering him because they have a right to have that gun. But once they start flaunting it, putting it in public, that's where it starts to impact tourism and start to have an effect on people. Would you not agree with that?
Well, it just depends because, frankly, if we're one of 45 states that doesn't allow this, you would either have to be from California, New York, Illinois, or Florida coming here as a tourist and not have seen the same thing in your state.
Let me ask you this. I want to go back to what the other senator from Orangeburg asked about. If the school or whoever is leasing to the church decides based on this they don't want to enter in the lease anymore, they got a right to do that, right?
I didn't hear the last part of your question.
What it says, as I understand it now, if a school leases a space to a church and the church authorizes its members to bring guns to church, then that's the limited circumstances under which the guns can actually enter the school.
Correct. This doesn't change anything about carrying in a school other than that one thing, which is that limited circumstance where if you have a church that's leasing a school, we went through that. It's in Section 7.
I get it. The only difference is this. Before on Sunday morning, everybody watched people going into the church. Nobody sees any guns going in the school because they were all concealed. Now people are going to see guns going into the school.
No, I don't think we've currently allowed a church to lease a school property and then allow someone to carry concealed at the church service on the leased school property.
But this would allow that.
I think that, this would allow it.
And my question then to you is, if based on that, the school just says, we don't want to enter the lease, that school has a right to terminate the lease.
I don't think it does the way this, I don't think the way this is drafted, it would give the school that ability to do.
Well, wouldn't the school always have a right to decide who leases their property?
Yeah, they could, I agree with you. They could say they're not going to lease it, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Because it could affect their insurance or other things to have guns on school property.
They could agree not to lease the property, yes.
Thank you.
Senator from Colleton, Senator Matthews, what purpose do you rise?
See if the senator would yield for a couple of questions, please.
He will.
Senator, quick question. In reading the preamble to the bill and reading the bill, can you clarify for me that portion of the preamble which says, so as to provide a person who possesses a concealed weapon permit may carry it openly on or about his person in a vehicle? What does that mean? Seems ambiguous to me.
I don't know why the summary has in a vehicle.
Yeah, it says on or about his person in a vehicle. And then I went into the bill itself, and it has that same confusing statement which to a
Where do
normal.
you see it in the actual bill itself? Can you point me
Okay,
to
I
something?
will point it to you. I found it just one second. I'll find it. While I'm looking for that, will you tell, I think it's under B. No.
B. But is there a certain section?
Section
number?
3. No, that's in general. I believe it's under section 3A, but I'll have to go through. It's trying to describe and explain it further there where a person can hold it. See, the reason why this is confusing is because you are aware that in South Carolina, we're a lot different in explaining how people who are traveling in this state and have a weapon in their car. That law varies throughout the United States, correct? Some states say you have to have it in plain view, even a pistol, or either some states say you have to have it in a compartment. You understand there's a big difference there?
I don't think there's anything in here that changes how you carry it in a.
So, all right, everybody in my household has a CWP except for me. And I own guns. So with this bill, what I'm asking is now, do I still have to carry it, even though I don't have a CWP?
Okay, let me
clarify that first question.
Yeah, all right, so it is in section 3, and it's paragraph 9.
Uh-huh.
It does clarify that the current law says that
if he's got a CWP, he can put it under the seat, right?
It says you can carry the handgun in the car, and it tells where you can carry it, and then that's in 9A, and then 9B. The current law says you can carry it concealed on or about your person in the car, but this says you can carry it openly or concealed on or about the person.
The reason why this whole bill is confusing to me is we have had this concealed weapons requirement of our citizens, and you have to go through more scrutiny, and you have to go through, to me, a long Saturday's class. Why would a person want to get a concealed weapon permit to now want to openly carry?
The concealed weapon permit program would still remain in place. You would still have to have a concealed weapon permit if you want to carry in other states where South Carolina has reciprocity. Those states are going to require that any person from this state who wants to carry concealed in a state where there's reciprocity, you would still have to have a valid concealed weapon permit that's issued in South Carolina in order to carry in those states. For example, if you want to carry in Georgia or North Carolina, if you cross the border into those states, if you're from South Carolina, you have to have a concealed weapon permit that's issued in Georgia or North Carolina, in South Carolina to carry in one of those two states.
If you wanted a concealed weapon permit, then why now do you want to leave it open? Why do you want to open carry? It seems
Again,
an oxymoron
it would be a personal preference of a concealed weapon permit holder, but it would allow the person to have an additional way that they could carry a handgun in public, and that's what this bill does. It expands how they can carry. It does not change who can carry or where they can carry.
Well, you realize we at least have we have some assistant prosecutors in this chamber, as well as at least one that I know of, former solicitor. And one of the primary charges that usually clouds their docket, I'm sure the Senator, I don't see him, Senator Famori can tell you, during his tenure are these gun charges where people get arrested on a normal traffic stop, and it's because they have their gun stored in the wrong place. So I'm going back to my initial question. Did your committee, or have y'all been able to resolve the ambiguity of where the citizens of South Carolina, if stopped, where it's okay for them to have their gun now under this law.
Talking about in a car?
Yes. If
No,
you
we didn't-
stop.
We didn't have any testimony on that issue.
Well, let's back up. Session has been clouded with a lot of things, and we've had a lot to do here since we didn't really have a full session last year during the pandemic. How many hours of hearings did you have on this issue?
We had over 3 hours of testimony last week.
3 hours, only 3 hours on
No,
something
it
this
was more-
important?
It was more than 3 hours.
See, because I've been on the subcommittee since I haven't been in the Senate long, but I've been on the subcommittee for something that I think, and it just might be me because I want to save some lives and make living a little bit easier for some people. I've been on a subcommittee for medical marijuana for a number of years, and we've taken countless hours of testimony from South Carolinians on why it's important. Do you realize, Senator, that we have had days of testimony from people that believe that that issue is very important? Do you realize that? Have you
On the
medical
subcommittee-
marijuana?
Yeah, I'm familiar with how much that committee met.
So do you agree with me, or do you oppose the fact that 3 hours is not a very long amount of time to debate this issue? Because I see just on reading this, and I'm just a baby lawyer, 30 years. I see on reading this that this bill, the way it's written, is confusing to a practitioner, much less a citizen who's trying to figure out how and when they can open carry versus if they don't have a CWP, where and how they should carry their guns. I'm just trying to keep young boys from, do you realize there's a confusion in this bill?
Senator, with just respectfully, in my judgment as the chairman of the subcommittee, I believe that we had a sufficient amount of testimony for the members to know where they stood on the issue, and we took it to a vote. It passed 3-2, and then the full Senate took action later.
Senator, you were in charge of how many days you would have hearings. Isn't that correct?
I was the subcommittee chairman.
And you were in charge, and you came to the Senate before me, and you realized that this is an issue that, because you talked about it earlier, that is important to our police officers and sheriffs, correct? You realize the importance of their input on this issue, correct?
I'm sure, yeah, this is obviously a bill that, I think probably everybody in this chamber has probably heard from somebody in law enforcement about this bill in some respect.
Well, the people who are going to come up on folks regarding subsection 3 would be, number one, your state troopers. Have you heard from the highest ranking member of the State Troopers Association, Department of Highways and Public Transportation, or DOT? Have you heard from any of those folks on how subsection 3, part 9, how that would be enforced and interpreted? Did you seek testimony from them? No?
I didn't go out and actively search for testimony. I held 2 hearings that were published on the Senate website, and people signed up to testify, or they appeared. And at the end of the hearing, I asked if anybody else wanted to be heard.
I understand, but
whether they had signed up or not. And we heard from every single person that wanted to be heard.
And we just put in...
And as the senator from Williamsburg said last week, standing right here, and I want to publicly thank him, he commented that when I hold a subcommittee, I let people be heard, and that's what we did last week on this bill.
Would you agree, as we stand here today and look at this legislation, that the input from I think his name was Director Woods, over all of the state troopers would be important on this issue, as well as I am surprised that you did not have any direct testimony or direct conferences with Director Keel, because Senator, do you realize that for medical affairs, when we served on that subcommittee, they were on it. They didn't rely on Mr. Bruder, their legislative assistant, legislative contact, but Director Keel came with a posse to explain why medical marijuana should not be in South Carolina because it would lead to, it would affect other crimes. And the reason why I'm asking this, Senator, did you know, is because I'm concerned at the numbers of almost 40,000, 39,000 accidental deaths of our children in America from 2018. Did you hear any of that testimony?
We did hear about gun violence and children's deaths. And one of the questions that was asked was, is there any way to determine how many of those are attributable to an act or omission of someone who is a licensed permit holder of a handgun?
And what did
and
you
the
find?
answer was that there was no way to determine that. Okay. Now, again, this bill would allow, it does not change who can carry. The people that are currently allowed to carry in South Carolina, as you know, Senator, you said that everyone in your household has a permit, except for you, that you know that there's a training requirement and there's a background check that has to be done, and then there's an ongoing background check that's going on with respect to existing permit holders. For example, if an existing permit holder gets charged, there's a report that SLED gets, like I think it's daily, that tells them who's been charged.
If someone has been charged.
So then they revoke the permit for a period of time when that happens. And so, the folks that this bill, as it currently is drafted, the way the people that it would apply to are those who have passed a background check, who have passed the training requirement, who have been allowed as a result of that to be issued a South Carolina weapons permit for a handgun, concealed weapons permit, and this simply would allow those folks an additional way that they could carry if they so chose, but they can't, it doesn't expand where they can carry, and it doesn't change who can carry.
Senator, all of that the SLED does as it relates to those owners of CWP, and the money this state has to pay for those, to make sure you keep a check on those folks who have CWP. Did your committee or did you hear testimony about whether or not for those people who have CWPs, whenever they are in a mental health crisis, whether or not there's a mandatory reporting of psychiatrists or psychologists for those people who have CWPs? I know there's a mandatory review and a reporting, say if someone got a CDV and they have a CWP, that SLED gets that information. But if, say, just because it's the senator from Williamsburg is beside me, he has a CWP and he's going through a new mental health crisis. Sorry, Senator. Is there a mechanism of required reporting to SLED so that the CWP of someone like the senator, his CWP would be suspended immediately?
We didn't get any testimony on that issue, no.
Wouldn't you agree that we have in the last year, it seems like since the pandemic, we have had an onslaught of nonstop shootings, people who are having mental health crises, primarily because of COVID-19 and a lot of other pressures that have come with it? Wouldn't you agree that most of these people who have committed these offenses are people who have permits but have gone through a mental health crisis? Wouldn't you agree?
You're talking about people that are committing these gun violence.
Let's just say in the last month, It seems like every one of them have been people that have legally owned a gun, but have, because of the effects of what's gone on in America with this COVID-19 and everything related, they have had difficulties, and they have been into doctors, had their guns, gone out, gotten guns, and killed innocent people.
I don't agree that what you've seen in these other places in the past few months, that those people are valid permit holders in their respective states. I haven't read that anywhere. Now, I may be.
I'm not, even if they're not permit holders, they're gun. Most of them.
But this bill. I mean, if it's your belief, Senator, that this bill, as currently drafted, would allow you to carry. Just because you can buy the gun, that's not what this bill says.
Senator, did you realize what I'm saying is I feel that there's some more work to do in South Carolina before we get to the point where we should be considering this. It seems that you've told us that SLED has a CWP division that checks on a daily basis if a person is charged with an offense that has a CWP, and they immediately will suspend. I've had clients that has happened to where they send them a notice and they have to turn in their CWP, or if an officer, when he arrests you for something, he has to seize your CWP license. My question to you is, given the state of, and I saw it the other night on TV, given the state of stressors as we've gone through this pandemic, don't you think we need to hit the pause button, Senator, and consider having a database or a reporting requirement to SLED, to the same SLED division, whereby if you have gone to the emergency room or your family doctor or a psychiatrist and you're going through a mental health crisis and you have a CWP, they should automatically have to report to SLED, and your CWP should be suspended. Thereby, you wouldn't be able to open carry into some grocery store and shoot up a bunch of people. Don't you agree that that is a consideration that we should make?
I would want to look at the existing law on that. I know that Senator from Lancaster, not Senator Johnson, but his predecessor, Senator Gregory, sponsored legislation that many of us supported several years ago that applies in a situation where someone has a mental illness. And I'd want to look at the existing law. And I don't agree that somebody who has a valid concealed weapon permit would just be able to walk into any grocery store if that grocery store has posted that you can't carry in there.
That wasn't a part of my scenario, Senator. I was saying if that's grocery store permitted open carry, because you have a lot of mom and pop small stores that might fit into the area where they don't mind open carry in their stores. I would hate to see those people succumb to death because we don't have this checks and balances. I mean, we've talked so openly about so many precursors that we need to look out for the people of South Carolina. This is one where I think we need to consider it. And Senator, did you know, I think before we move forward on this, we should all, because we've heard SLED say that, and police officers and sheriff deputies say they don't want medical marijuana because it's a gateway to other drugs. Well, what about this being a gateway to other criminal activity?
Well, Senator, again, I just respectfully disagree with you that this bill, if passed as it's currently drafted, would be a gateway for more criminal activity because again, respectfully, the people that are going to be able to carry openly, if they so chose, if this bill passed, the way it's drafted now, those people have passed a background check and they've passed the training requirement. And I respectfully disagree with
Senator,
what you said.
Consider Mark.
I'm sorry.
Senator, considering the Ahmaud Arbery hunting down case of the young man in Brunswick, Georgia, it's hard for me to buy this because you got people that are being killed under this theory of we're going to get rid of this tyranny and we're going to take back our country. Do you realize this bill is being presented and promoted and fed to us in a time when we're having a lot of young men shot down, killed without weapon by people who so-called have a right to have a weapon? Do you realize that's why I wish that you would consider through your committee to pump the brakes on this? You realize I also believe that we shouldn't proceed any further unless SLED can tell us that this is something they want.
Senator, I mean, my subcommittee no longer has any jurisdiction over the bill. It's now before the full Senate.
Senator from Charleston, Senator Kempson, what purpose do you rise?
When the senator finishes, I'd like to be heard on.
Any other questions for me?
Senator from Darlington, Senator from Lloyd, what purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry, sir.
Are we still on the committee report?
Just subcommittee chairman's giving a
And the
report.
committee report has not been adopted yet. Is that correct?
There's no committee report.
Okay. And parliamentary inquiry, how many amendments are on the desk?
21 at this time.
21 amendments on the desk. Okay. I think we see what the senator from Edgefield is planning on doing now. I know we got to go to some committee meetings.
Other questions?
Senator from Macon. Senator from Dorchester, Senator Bennett, what purpose do you rise?
Would Senator yield for just a couple of quick questions?
He will.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate your explaining this bill because I'm sure it will come as no surprise to you. There's a lot of misinformation that's been floating around really for the past few months with respect to this bill of what's actually in it, what's not in it, those sorts of things. Would you agree, Senator?
Yes, I agree. As you know, and I'll be happy to explain it again if I need to, but I've got all the details about what's in the bill as it's currently drafted.
No, Senator, I don't think, I personally don't need any more explanation of what's actually in the bill. I think you're very clear with respect that it doesn't expand anything, doesn't pull away anything, doesn't really change anything, just adds the ability for someone to carry openly. Or, Senator, did you have any testimony in your committee? Because one of the things that I've heard from a number of constituents back home is it's not even necessarily about the carrying open. It's as much of if someone's concealed weapon is somehow visible at some point in time when they didn't intend for that to be, that technically that's a violation of our current statutes. Is that correct?
Yeah, we had at least two people that testified to that, and I think I brought that up briefly when I was answering some questions from the senator from Orangeburg and the senator from Clarendon.
Senator, one piece that is new, where it talks about some of this training, is it appears to be in respect to for those folks who wish to carry openly, that there's some additional components to the training. Can you talk to us a little bit about those?
Yeah, so when I got up and I explained the bill in the different things that it does, it adds training component for the concealed weapon permit training, because it adds instruction on, number one, the proper securing of a firearm in a holster, number two, cocked and locked firearm carrying, number three, the methods for responding to someone who attempts to take a firearm from a holster, and number four, de-escalation techniques for hostile situations.
So it appears to me, Senator, that going forward, anyone wishing to have this ability, these components are going to be integrated into the training components, regardless of whether your desire is to carry concealed or openly, correct?
Correct. I mean, these are additional components of the instruction that the education course must include.
Okay, so for folks now that currently maintain a CWP in the state of South Carolina that did not have these new components as part of that training, how do we deal with those people?
Well, there's no requirement that the person go back and take the course again in the existing bill.
So those people would continue to be able to carry concealed as if they always had, but they would not be able to carry openly. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. You still be able to carry openly. This amendment or the language in the bill on Section 6 as it relates to the additional instruction component for the education course would apply to all the people who take the course after this bill became law, or actually when the bill becomes law, which has a certain number of days after the governor signs it. The way the bill, and that's something I want to point out, is that the bill says that it's 60 days after the governor signs it, the provisions would go into effect in state law. So this course requirement, these additional components to the course requirement would go into effect for concealed weapons training classes after that effective date.
Okay. Getting back to some of the exchange that you had from Senator Colleton, where discussion was talked about, and it seems like anytime we have this discussion, it comes up the same way over and over again about the fear of increased violence, those sorts of things, which is a fair concern. I don't think anybody here is excited about any type of increased violence. But Senator, did anyone testify during the subcommittee hearing or to address the fact of violations or violent crimes, or really any crimes for that matter, of the general population versus the population that maintain concealed weapon permits in South Carolina?
There was nobody that had any statistics, although it was conceded by several witnesses that the percentage of violent crimes that are committed by people who have a concealed weapon permit is very low.
And would it surprise you, Senator? I was just because I remember this discussion. We had this discussion, many of these discussions, actually during a bill a few years ago, number of years ago. Senator, when you and I first entered the Senate, there was expansion of the concealed weapon permit laws that allowed for concealed carry in restaurants or bars that served alcohol. Do you remember some of those conversations, Senator?
I remember that. Yep.
And a lot of those conversations surrounded around the same thing, is we're going to have this this Wild West type of scenario with increased violence and those sorts of things. And I couldn't remember some of those data points, Senator, but would it surprise you, in just a quick little search here while you were speaking, that, for instance, and I don't mean to cast a negative light on our law enforcement personnel by any stretch of the imagination, but just a quick search of an article that was put forward said that police, there were firearms violations by law enforcement officers at a rate of 6.9 per 100,000. And would it surprise you, Senator, that in the same period, this happened to be from Florida, but Florida is one of those, I think you said, that does not have open carry, one of the 5 states like us that does not have open carry, so maybe it's a pretty good comparison. But it would surprise you, Senator, that the same data of firearm violations for permit holders or concealed weapons permit holders was 0.31 per 100,000.
That does not surprise me.
Senator, it's the good guys, right? The good gals, the good guys and the good gals that are the ones that are going through this process of maintaining this and have an appreciation. Also, Senator was interested in the conversation that you were having earlier where it talked about somebody that was adjudicated for mental illness, had some violent crime issues, had some mental illness, violent crimes as attributed to mental illness. When those went in front of the judicial system, Senator, don't we already have a process for identifying those folks and flagging those folks against firearms for certain situations?
We do for certain situations, and again, if someone becomes unable to have or possess a weapon under state law, they are required under existing law to have their concealed weapon permit, if they have one, revoked.
Well, that was going to be my next point, Senator, that irrespective of whether or not you have a concealed weapon permit or not, if you meet those criteria, you're going to be flagged and the officials are going to be notified, correct, Senator?
Yeah,
you don't get a pass simply because you have a concealed weapons permit, correct?
No, you don't, because
Right.
again, it says permit is valid statewide unless revoked because the person has, number one, they become a person prohibited under state law from possessing a weapon.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator from Edgefield, Senator Massey, what purpose do you rise?
Mr. President, with Senator from Macon retaining the floor, I ask unanimous consent to make an announcement.
Is there objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Senator
Mr.
Massey.
President, as you know, tomorrow we have a joint assembly that begins at noon, I think for some Board of Trustees seats, if I recall. The President has asked me to make a motion that we come in at 11:45 tomorrow so that we can gather and walk over for the joint assembly. The Senate will sit in the balcony tomorrow, as we've done for other joint assemblies this session. And then the expectation is that the joint assembly won't last all that long, and so that we would come back at 1:30. So hopefully that would give senators and staff an opportunity to get something to eat before we begin tomorrow, but then we would recede after the joint assembly until 1:30. So with that announcement, Mr. President, with the Senator from Macon holding the floor, I ask unanimous consent that if and when the Senate adjourned today, that it adjourn to meet at 11:45 tomorrow.
Is objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Senator from Edgefield.
Mr. President, I also want to see, with Senator from Macon holding the floor, see if there's anybody who has any unanimous consent requests, because I think we all know we've got to get to committee this afternoon, and we'll get back on this tomorrow.
Senator from Orangeburg, Senator Hutto, what purpose do you rise?
Unanimous consent to go to the local calendar to a Bamberg Consolidation Bill 771 on page 2.
There's an objection to go into the local calendar, page 2.
That's with me holding the floor on this bill, right?
With the Senator from Macon holding the floor.
Right.
Page 2, Senate Bill 771.
There's an amendment on the desk, and I would move to adopt the amendment, but not give the bill a second reading today. I just want to adopt the amendment.
Who opposes the amendment?
Senator Hutto proposes the following amendment. Amends the bill, strikes all after enacting words.
This is some suggested language that we've gotten after we introduced the bill, and I want to put it on the calendar so everybody can look at it.
First one, question is adoption of the amendment. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. The amendment's adopted. Senator from Richland, Senator McLeod, what purpose do you rise?
Unanimous consent request to, at the next available opportunity, that the Senate adjourn in memory of 15-year-old Sanaa Amenhotep, who was brutally murdered and lives in Richland County.
Is there an objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Senator from Oconee, Senator Alexander, what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Unanimous consent with the senator to make it hold the floor that we go to the box and just read the box.
Objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Before we go to that, Senator from Horry, Senator Rankin, what purpose do you rise?
Brief announcement, Mr. President. Full judiciary meet on 308 at 2:30.
So noted. Senator from Berkeley, Senator from Dorchester, Senator Bennett? No. Clerk will read.
Introduction of a bill by Senator Alexander that amends the code related to the liability for taxes and returns by adding a section to provide for a property tax credit or refund to the transfer of a boat or boat motor.
Bill referred to the Finance Committee.
Introduction of a concurrent resolution by Senator Stevens requests Department of Transportation name a road in Dorchester County the Captain Jerome Jones Road, erect appropriate signs and markers.
Transportation Committee.
House is returned to the Senate with amendments as 201. Bill by Senator Hembry. It amends the code relating to the Education Accountability Act, adds an article to provide revised accountability measures for public schools and public school districts.
Placed on the calendar.
Introduction of House Bill 3591. This is a bill that amends the code, adds a section so as to improve the means for evaluating education preparation programs by providing for the annual development and publication of the South Carolina Teacher Preparation Report Card.
Education Committee.
Introduction of House Bill 3592. This bill relates to the statewide assessment program to promote student learning and student performance so as to remove social studies from among the subjects assessed in the 3rd grade through 8th grade to provide specific diagnostic information.
Education Committee. Desk is clear. Senator Maysfield. Senator Macon.
I would make a motion that with me holding the floor on this bill, that the Senate now adjourn.
Objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Senate will stand adjourned until 11:45 a.m.